We don't serve your kind here." The words left Maya Johnson's mouth before she even realized how sharp they sounded, cutting clean through the soft jazz playing in the hotel lobby and the low murmur of wealthy guests checking in for the night. Outside, rain poured in heavy sheets, tapping against the glass walls of the Grand Meridian Hotel like an impatient warning. Inside, everything gleamed: polished marble floors, gold-trimmed chandeliers, and guests wrapped in tailored coats that cost more than Maya made in a month. And standing right in front of her, dripping onto that perfect marble, was a man who didn't belong. His backpack was worn, straps frayed at the edges, his jeans damp and slightly torn at the hem, sneakers soaked through. He looked like he had been walking for miles in the cold New York rain. The man offered a small, polite smile, his voice calm despite the situation. "I'd like a room for the night, please." Maya didn't return the smile. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't type. She didn't even check the system. Her eyes flicked up and down, taking in every detail: the water dripping from his sleeves, the cheap fabric of his jacket, the way other guests nearby were already glancing over with quiet judgment. She knew this type, or at least, she thought she did. People who wandered in hoping for sympathy, for a mistake, for a moment of kindness they could take advantage of. And tonight, she didn't have the energy for kindness. Not after the day she'd had. Not after being reminded, again and again, exactly where she stood in a world that only respected money. "We're fully booked," she said flatly, her tone professional but cold, rehearsed almost. The man didn't argue. He simply nodded once, as if he had expected the answer, but something in his eyes lingered, something calm, observant, like he was taking in more than just her words. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. Maya exhaled, irritation creeping in. "Yes, sir. Completely booked. Maybe try somewhere else." She didn't offer suggestions. Didn't look back at the screen. Didn't check. Because to her, he wasn't a guest. He was a disruption. A reminder of the line she worked so hard to stay above. Behind him, a couple stepped forward, their designer luggage rolling smoothly across the marble. Maya's posture shifted instantly, her voice softening. A practiced smile appearing as if flipped by a switch. "Good evening. Welcome to the Grand Meridian." Checking in. The contrast was immediate. Noticeable. Intentional. The man stood there for one more second, unnoticed now, invisible again, before he gave a small nod and stepped aside. Rain gusted in as the glass doors opened behind him, cold air brushing across the lobby, but no one paid attention as he walked back out into the storm. Not even Maya. Because in her mind, she had done her job. Protected the image. Maintained the standard. And maybe, just maybe, protected herself from one more situation she couldn't afford to get wrong. But what Maya didn't see, what she didn't even think to notice, was the way the man paused just outside the doors, rain soaking through his jacket as he glanced back inside, his eyes landing on her one last time. Not angry, not hurt, just thoughtful, as if he had just learned something important, something final. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small metallic card, running his thumb along its edge for a brief second before slipping it back inside. Then he turned and disappeared into the rain, leaving behind nothing but a faint trail of water on the marble floor, and a moment that would change everything by morning. By the time the rain stopped, Maya had already moved on, or at least she told herself she had. The lobby lights dimmed slightly as the night shift settled in, the soft hum of conversation fading into quiet footsteps and distant elevator chimes. She adjusted her blazer, smoothing it down as she stared at her reflection in the polished marble behind the desk. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked controlled. Exactly how it needed to be. But her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her back into reality. A message from her manager, 3 words that made her stomach tighten. Meeting. 8 a.m. Maya exhaled slowly, pressing her lips together. That was never a good sign. Not after the week she had been having. Not after the complaints. Not after being reminded, again and again, that she was replaceable. She glanced toward the glass doors, now quiet, the storm reduced to nothing but damp pavement and flickering streetlights. For a brief second, an image crossed her mind. The man, standing there, soaked, calm, watching. She shook it off immediately. He was just another stranger. Another distraction. Another problem she could not afford to care about. The next morning arrived faster than she wanted. The sky was still gray, the air crisp, and the city had that early morning stillness before everything sped up again. Maya stepped into the hotel lobby at exactly 7:45, her heels clicking against the marble, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. But something felt different. The usual rhythm was off. Staff members were already gathered in small clusters, whispering, adjusting uniforms, checking their reflections. Even the manager, Mr. Collins, looked unusually tense, pacing near the front desk, his tie slightly crooked. That alone was enough to set Maya on edge. "What is going on?" she asked quietly as she stepped behind the desk. One of the bellhops leaned in, lowering his voice. "Corporate is here. Big visit. Like, surprise inspection level." Maya's heart skipped. Corporate. Without warning. That never meant anything good. Mr. Collins clapped his hands sharply, drawing everyone's attention. "Listen up. The owner is visiting this morning. In person. No announcements, no schedule. That means we treat every single guest like they are him. Do you understand?" A chorus of quick nods followed. Maya felt a chill run through her, but she forced herself to stay composed. This was what she trained for. Precision. Perfection. No mistakes. He could walk in looking like anyone, Mr. Collins continued, his eyes scanning the room. "And if we fail to meet standards, there will be consequences." Maya swallowed quietly, her fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the desk. Looking like anyone. The words echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside. It did not matter. She had done her job. She always did. The morning rush began soon after, a steady flow of guests checking out, new arrivals rolling in, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. Maya moved through it all with practiced efficiency, her smile returning, her tone warm, her movements precise. Everything was back under control. Until the doors opened again. It started with the sound. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the low hum of engines pulling up outside, tires rolling smoothly against the pavement. Then came the movement. Heads turning. Staff straightening. The bellhops stepping back instinctively. Maya looked up. Black SUVs lined the entrance, their glossy surfaces reflecting the morning light. The doors opened one by one, and men in sharp suits stepped out. Their presence quiet, but commanding. The lobby shifted instantly, the air tightening, the energy changing. And then, finally, he stepped out. Maya's breath caught before she even understood why. The same man, but not the same at all. Gone was the worn jacket, the soaked backpack, the tired look of someone walking through the rain. Now he stood in a perfectly tailored suit, clean, composed, every detail sharp and deliberate. His hair was neatly styled, his posture confident, his presence impossible to ignore. Conversation stopped. Movement slowed. The entire lobby seemed to pause. Maya felt her chest tighten, her mind scrambling to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. No, that was not possible. It could not be. But it was. He walked forward calmly, each step measured, the sound of his shoes soft against the marble. Staff members greeted him with immediate respect, heads slightly bowed, voices careful. Mr. Collins hurried forward, his entire demeanor shifting into something almost unrecognizable. "Mr. Walker, welcome. It is an honor." Maya's world tilted. Walker. The name hit harder than anything else. Ethan Walker. Owner. The realization slammed into her all at once. Heavy, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Her fingers went cold, her breath shallow, and then, as if guided by something she could not control, her eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. Ethan stopped just a few feet from the desk, his gaze steady, calm, unreadable. But there was something there. Recognition. Not surprise. Not anger. Just certainty. Like he had already seen everything he needed to see. The silence stretched for a fraction of a second, but it felt longer. He took one final step forward, placing his hand lightly on the polished surface of the front desk, the same place where she had stood the night before. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, controlled, clear enough for only her to hear. "Are you still fully booked?" Maya's heart dropped, and in that moment, she knew. This was not just a visit. This was the beginning of something she could not undo. The words hit harder than any raised voice ever could. "Are you still fully booked?" Ethan's tone did not change, but something beneath it made Maya's chest tighten, like the air had suddenly grown heavier around her. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For the first time since she had started working at the Grand Meridian, Maya Johnson did not have an answer ready. Around them, the lobby slowly came back to life, but not quite the same. Conversations were quieter now, movements more careful. Every staff member seemed aware of the tension hanging in the air, even if they did not fully understand it. Mr. Collins stepped closer, forcing a polite laugh that sounded thin and strained. "I am sure there has been some misunderstanding, sir. Our staff always maintains the highest standards." Maya felt the words land on her shoulders like weight. Standards. That word again. The same word she had used to justify everything the night before. Ethan did not look away from her. Not even for a second. "I believe they do," he said calmly, his voice measured. "That is exactly what I am here to observe." Maya swallowed, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk just a little tighter. She could feel every detail of the moment now. The cool surface under her palms. The faint scent of polished wood and expensive perfume in the air. The quiet expectation from everyone watching. And the memory. The rain. His soaked jacket. Her voice saying no without even checking. "Sir, she started, but her voice faltered. Not because she did not know what to say, but because every possible sentence sounded wrong before it even left her lips. Ethan finally shifted his gaze, just slightly, glancing around the lobby as if taking everything in. "Tell me something," he said, his tone still even. "Last night, how did you decide there were no rooms available?" The question was simple. Too simple. And that made it impossible to escape. Maya's heart pounded harder, her mind racing through the moment again, searching for something she could hold on to, something she could defend. But there was nothing. No system check. No confirmation. Just an assumption. Just a decision. She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "I believed we were at capacity." It was not a lie, but it was not the truth either. Ethan's eyes returned to hers, steady, unblinking. "You believed," he repeated softly. Not accusing. Not angry. Just precise. The words lingered in the space between them. Mr. Collins shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to step in without making things worse. A few guests nearby pretended not to listen, but their attention never fully left the front desk. Maya felt the pressure build, not from Ethan's presence, but from what she knew he already understood. He did not need her explanation. He had already seen it. "May I show you something?" Ethan asked. The question caught her off guard. She nodded before she could think, her body moving on instinct. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a sleek black phone, tapping the screen with practiced ease. Within seconds, he turned it slightly toward her. Security footage. The timestamp from the night before. There she was, standing behind the desk, posture stiff, expression guarded. And there he was, soaked, standing quietly, asking for a room. Maya felt her stomach drop as she watched herself speak, heard the cold edge in her own voice, saw the way she did not even glance at the screen before refusing him. It looked worse than it felt. Sharper, clearer, undeniable. Ethan locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You did not check," he said simply. It was not a question. Maya's throat tightened. "No," she admitted quietly. The word felt heavier than anything she had said that morning. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not loud, but it was full. Full of everything that had led to this point. Full of everything that could come next. "Why?" Ethan asked. Not sharply. Not aggressively. Just directly. Maya looked at him. Really looked this time. Not at the suit or the title or the power he carried, but at the person standing in front of her. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. He had been the same man the night before. Calm. Patient. Observant. The only thing that had changed was how she chose to see him. Her voice came out softer now, less guarded, less certain. "Because I thought I already knew," she said. The truth settled between them, simple and uncomfortable. Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable, but not cold, not distant, just thoughtful, the same way it had been when he stood in the rain. "That is a dangerous habit in this business," he said finally. Maya nodded slightly, unable to argue, because she knew he was right. But what she did not expect was what came next. Ethan stepped back just enough to create a small space between them, his tone shifting, not softer, but different. Less about the mistake, more about what came after. "The question is not what you did," he said. "It is what you do now." Maya felt something shift inside her, subtle but undeniable. This was not the end. Not yet. Not a punishment waiting to happen. Not a decision already made. This was something else. something harder. Because now, the outcome depended on her. And as the weight of that realization settled in, Maya Johnson understood one thing clearly. This moment was not about losing her job. It was about whether she deserved to keep it. The lobby did not return to normal after that. It only pretended to. The same footsteps echoed across the marble floor. The same soft music played in the background. The same polite greetings filled the air. But beneath it all, something had shifted. Something fragile. Something watching. Maya stood behind the desk, her posture still straight, her expression composed, but inside, everything felt different. Every guest who approached her now carried weight. Every interaction felt like it mattered more than it had just an hour ago. Not because Ethan Walker was standing somewhere in the building, but because she knew now that she had been seen. Not just her actions, but the choices behind them. "Good morning. Welcome to the Grand Meridian," she said to the next guest, her voice warm, steady, intentional. And this time, when she typed, she checked. Every detail. Every option. No assumptions. No shortcuts. The guest smiled, thanked her, and moved on. It was a small moment. Almost invisible. But to Maya, it felt like the first real step she had taken all day. Across the lobby, Ethan watched quietly. He had moved away from the front desk, speaking briefly with Mr. Collins and a few senior staff members. But his attention never fully left her. Not in a controlling way. Not in a threatening way. Just observant. Like he was waiting to see something unfold. An hour passed. Then another. The morning rush softened into a steady rhythm, and for the first time since he had arrived, Ethan walked back toward the desk. Maya noticed him immediately, but she did not freeze this time. She did not look away either. She met his presence with something steadier. Not confidence exactly, but something close. Something earned. He stopped in front of her, resting his hands lightly on the counter again, mirroring. The same position from earlier. "How many rooms are available right now?" he asked. His tone was calm, but the question carried weight. Maya did not rush. She turned to the screen, typed carefully, double-checked the system, scanned the availability, and only then did she look back at him. "We have 12 rooms open," she said clearly. 3 suites, 5 deluxe rooms, and 4 standard rooms. Ethan nodded once, his expression unreadable, but there was no tension in his posture this time. "And if someone walked in right now," he continued, "looking like I did last night?" Maya felt the question settle in, but it did not shake her the way it had before. Not because it was easier, but because she understood it now. "I would check first," she said, "and I would treat them like a guest." There was no hesitation in her voice. No defense. Just truth. Ethan studied her for a moment, longer this time, as if measuring not just her words, but the shift behind them. "Why?" he asked again. The same question, but a different moment. Maya inhaled slowly, choosing her words carefully, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to be clear. "Because last night I made a decision based on what I thought I saw," she said. "Today I know better." The answer hung in the air, simple but grounded. Ethan's gaze softened slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough for Maya to notice. He leaned back, just a fraction, his hands leaving the counter. "Improvement is a rare thing to witness in real time," he said quietly. It was not praise. Not exactly. But it was not criticism either. It was something in between. Something that acknowledged the change without excusing the past. Maya nodded once, accepting it for what it was. Around them, the lobby continued its rhythm, but the tension that had filled the space earlier had shifted into something quieter. Something more reflective. Mr. Collins approached cautiously, his expression still tight, clearly unsure how the situation would resolve. "Sir, we have prepared the conference room for your review," he said. Ethan glanced toward him briefly, then back at Maya. "I will be there shortly," he replied. Then, without another word, he turned and began walking toward the elevators, his presence drawing subtle attention with every step. Maya watched him go, not with fear this time, but with awareness. She understood now that this was not about one moment, not about one mistake. It was about something bigger, something deeper. And just as she turned back to her screen, ready to continue her shift, the doors opened again. This time, it was not a guest with designer luggage or polished shoes. It was a woman, older, her coat worn, her shoes damp from the sidewalk, her hands trembling slightly as she stepped inside. She hesitated near the entrance, glancing around the grand lobby like she did not belong there, like she was not sure she was allowed to be. And for a brief second, Maya saw it. The same moment. The same choice. The same line she had drawn the night before. Only now, she was standing on the other side of it. The woman took a small step forward, her voice soft, uncertain. "Excuse me, do you have a place I could sit for a while?" The question was not about a room. Not really. Maya felt her chest tighten, not from pressure this time, but from recognition. This was it. Not a test. Not a performance. Just a moment. A real one. She stepped out from behind the desk, her posture relaxed, her voice warm in a way that did not feel forced. "Of course," she said gently. Coming out of the cold. And somewhere across the lobby, near the elevator doors, Ethan Walker paused just long enough to see it happen. The woman hesitated at the edge of the lobby, as if the polished marble beneath her feet might reject her at any second, her damp coat clinging to her shoulders, her fingers trembling slightly from the cold, and for a moment the entire space seemed to hold its breath again, waiting to see what Maya Johnson would do, because just hours ago this same lobby had witnessed a different version of her, one that stood behind the desk and drew invisible lines between who belonged and who did not. But now Maya stepped forward without hesitation, her heels softer against the marble, her posture no longer guarded but open, and she offered a small, genuine smile that did not feel practiced or forced. "You are more than welcome to sit here," she said gently, guiding the woman toward a seating area near the tall windows where the morning light filtered through the glass. Warm and quiet, a contrast to the cold outside. The woman looked surprised, almost unsure how to respond to kindness that came without conditions. "Thank you," she whispered, lowering herself slowly into the chair, her hands still wrapped tightly together as if she was afraid to take up too much space. Maya noticed everything now, not just the worn edges of the coat or the damp shoes, but the hesitation, the quiet apology in the way the woman carried herself, and without thinking twice, Maya turned back toward the front desk, grabbing a clean glass of water and a small folded napkin before returning. "Here, this might help," she said softly, placing them within reach. The woman's eyes flickered with something deeper this time, not just gratitude, but recognition, like she had been invisible for so long that being seen felt unfamiliar. Across the lobby, Ethan Walker remained near the elevator, his hand resting lightly against the polished metal door as he watched the moment unfold. Not interrupting, not stepping in, just observing with the same quiet attention he had carried since the night before. But this time there was a subtle shift in his expression, something less distant, less analytical, as if what he was seeing now answered a question he had not spoken out loud. Maya returned to the desk after a few seconds, but her awareness had changed. She did not retreat behind the counter the way she used to. She moved with intention, checking on guests, answering calls, offering assistance not as a task, but as a choice. And the difference, though small in each action, built into something noticeable, something real. An hour passed, then another, and the woman by the window remained quietly seated, occasionally glancing around the lobby, as if expecting to be asked to leave. But no one approached her with that question, not anymore. Instead, a housekeeper passed by and offered a polite smile. A bellhop paused briefly to ask if she needed anything, and Maya made sure to check in without making it obvious, creating space without pressure, something she had never thought about before. And then, just as the morning settled into a calm rhythm, the elevator doors opened again, and Ethan stepped back into the lobby, his presence still commanding, still drawing subtle attention. But this time, Maya did not feel the same tightness in her chest. She looked up, met his gaze for a brief moment, and then returned to her work, not avoiding him, not focusing on him, just continuing. Because for the first time, she understood that this was not about him anymore. It was about her choices, her actions, her growth. Ethan walked slowly across the lobby, not toward the desk, but toward the seating area by the window, where the woman sat, her hands now resting more calmly in her lap. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low and respectful. "Good morning," he said. The woman looked up, surprised, unsure how to respond to someone dressed the way he was speaking to her with that kind of tone. "Good morning," she replied softly. Ethan glanced briefly toward Maya, then back to the woman. "I hope you are comfortable," he continued, and she nodded, still slightly uncertain. She was kind. The woman added quietly, her eyes shifting toward Maya for a second before returning to him. Ethan followed her gaze, his expression thoughtful, and for a moment, the connection between all three of them existed without words, a simple chain of actions, one moment leading to another, one choice reshaping the next. He nodded once, almost to himself, before turning back toward the front desk. And this time, when he approached Maya, there was no tension in the air, no unspoken weight pressing down on the moment, just a quiet understanding that something had changed, not erased, not forgotten, but transformed. He rested his hand lightly on the counter again, the same gesture from before, but it felt different now, less like a test, and more like a continuation. "What would you do?" he asked calmly. "If she asked for a room tonight?" Maya did not hesitate. She turned to the system, already pulling up availability, her fingers moving with steady precision. "I would check what we have open," she said, her voice even. "And I would offer her the best option within her means." She paused for just a second, then added, "And if she did not have the means, I would still try to find a solution." Ethan watched her closely, not searching for perfection, but for sincerity, and what he saw was not the same receptionist from the night before, not the same guarded expression or quick judgment, but someone who had faced her own reflection and chosen to change it, not because she was told to, but because she understood why she needed to. He nodded slowly, his voice quieter now, almost reflective. "That is where real standards begin," he said, and for the first time since he arrived, Maya allowed herself a small breath, not of relief, but of clarity, because she finally understood that this was not about proving anything to him. It was about becoming someone she could stand behind, even when no one was watching. The rest of the morning unfolded with a quiet steadiness that felt almost unfamiliar, as if the Grand Meridian itself had taken a breath and decided to slow down. But beneath that calm surface, something deeper was shifting, not just within Maya, but within the way the space responded to her presence. Every guest she greeted, every question she answered, every small interaction carried a level of attention that had not been there before, not because she was trying to impress anyone, but because she was no longer operating on assumptions. She was present, fully aware, and that awareness began to ripple outward in ways she could not have predicted. Near the window, the older woman had relaxed slightly, her shoulders no longer tense, her hands no longer clenched tightly together, and when Maya passed by again, the woman looked up with a small, genuine smile that lingered just long enough to matter. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said softly, and Maya returned the smile without hesitation. "You are welcome to stay as long as you need," she replied, and for a moment, that exchange felt more meaningful than any polished guest interaction she had performed before, because it was real. Across the lobby, Ethan Walker remained quietly observant, moving through the space with a measured presence, speaking occasionally with staff, reviewing details, but never interrupting the natural flow. He was not looking for perfection. Maya realized that now. He was looking for truth, for consistency, for the small decisions people made when they believed no one important was watching. And that realization settled into her with a clarity that was both grounding and challenging, because it meant that every moment mattered, not just the ones under scrutiny. As the afternoon approached, the energy in the hotel shifted again, the early rush giving way to a more relaxed pace, guests lingering in the lounge, soft conversations filling the air, and Maya found herself moving through it all with a quiet confidence that did not come from certainty, but from intention. She was learning, adjusting, paying attention, and that process, though subtle, was visible to anyone who cared to notice, including Ethan, who eventually made his way back to the front desk once more, his steps unhurried, his expression thoughtful. "You are adapting quickly," he said, his voice low enough to keep the moment private. Maya met his gaze, not with defensiveness, but with honesty. "I am trying to," she replied, and there was no need to say more than that, because the effort was already evident. Ethan nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something unspoken, before glancing toward the seating area again. "And her," he added quietly. "What happens when she leaves?" Maya followed his gaze, considering the question not as a test, but as a continuation of the same lesson. "Then I hope she leaves feeling like she mattered," she said, her voice steady, and Ethan studied her for a moment longer, as if weighing the sincerity of that answer. But before he could respond, The calm atmosphere was interrupted by the arrival of a sharply dressed guest, his presence immediately commanding attention, his expression impatient as he approached the desk, placing his leather briefcase down with a firm motion. "I need a room, now," he said, his tone clipped. Used to being accommodated without delay, Maya turned toward him, her posture composed, her voice even. "Of course, sir, let me check availability for you," she said, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced precision. But the man barely acknowledged her words, his gaze already drifting toward Ethan, recognizing something familiar, something important, his demeanor shifting instantly. "Mr. Walker," he said, his tone changing to one of immediate respect, almost deference. "I did not expect to see you here." Ethan offered a polite nod, but did not engage further, allowing the focus to remain on the interaction at the desk. And in that moment, Maya saw it clearly, the contrast, the same man who had dismissed her presence seconds ago now adjusting his entire posture because of who stood nearby. And for a brief second, the old instinct surfaced, the part of her that understood how the world worked, how status dictated behavior, how quickly people shifted when power entered the room. But she did not follow that instinct. She stayed grounded, continuing the process she had started. "We have several rooms available, sir," she said calmly, listing the options with clarity and fairness, offering the same level of service she had given to every guest that day. Not more, not less, just consistent. The man nodded, slightly impatient, selecting a suite without much thought, and as Maya completed the booking, she handed him the key with a polite, professional smile. "Enjoy your stay," she said, her tone unchanged, and for the first time, the interaction did not feel influenced by who was watching. It felt aligned with who she was becoming. Ethan observed the exchange without interruption, but there was a subtle shift in his expression, something closer to approval, though he did not voice it directly. Instead, he stepped forward slightly once the guest moved away, his voice quiet but clear. "That is the standard," he said, and Maya understood exactly what he meant. Not perfection, not performance, but consistency, integrity, the ability to treat every person with the same level of respect regardless of what they appeared to be. And as the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting soft reflections across the marble floor, Maya Johnson realized that this was not about fixing a single mistake. It was about rebuilding the way she saw the world, one interaction at a time, one choice at a time. And for the first time since she had started this job, she felt something she had not expected to feel in a place like this. Not pressure, not fear, but purpose. By late afternoon, the light in the Grand Meridian had softened into a warm golden glow, stretching across the marble floors and reflecting off the tall glass walls. And for the first time that day, Maya Johnson allowed herself a small moment to breathe, not because the pressure was gone, but because she had learned how to stand within it without letting it control her. The rhythm of the hotel had settled into something steady, something predictable, but beneath that calm, the lessons of the morning still lingered, shaping every choice she made. Near the window, the older woman slowly stood up, adjusting her worn coat, her movements more certain now, less hesitant than before. Maya noticed immediately and stepped out from behind the desk once again, her approach natural, unforced. "Are you heading out?" she asked gently. The woman nodded, offering a soft smile that reached her eyes this time. "Yes, I do not want to take up space any longer," she said quietly, and Maya shook her head slightly, her voice warm. "You were never taking up space. You were just here," she replied, and for a brief moment, the woman looked at her as if those words carried more meaning than they should have, as if being told she belonged, even for a short time, had shifted something inside her. "Thank you," she said again, but this time the words were fuller, steadier, before turning and walking toward the doors, stepping back into the world outside. And as the glass doors closed behind her, Maya felt a quiet sense of completion, not because she had done something extraordinary, but because she had chosen differently when it mattered. Across the lobby, Ethan Walker had been watching once again, his posture relaxed, his expression thoughtful, and as Maya returned to her position behind the desk, he approached slowly, his presence no longer carrying the same weight of tension, but still holding significance. "She left differently than she arrived," he said, his tone calm, almost reflective. Maya nodded slightly, understanding what he meant. "So did I," she replied, and for a moment, there was a quiet acknowledgement between them, something unspoken but clear. Ethan studied her for a second longer, then glanced around the lobby as if taking in the entire environment, not just the space, but the people within it, the interactions, the subtle shifts that had taken place over the course of the day. "Do you know why I do this?" he asked suddenly, the question catching Maya off guard. She shook her head slightly, her curiosity genuine now, not guarded. Ethan leaned lightly against the counter, his voice low enough to keep the conversation private. "Because policies do not reveal truth," he said. "People do." Maya listened carefully, the words settling into her with a quiet weight. "I have reports, numbers, feedback forms," he continued. "But none of those tell me how someone is treated when they are not expected, when they do not look the part, when they do not fit the image we sell." His gaze returned to hers, steady but not harsh. "That is where the real standard lies." Maya felt a small shift inside her again. Not discomfort this time, but understanding, because she had been part of that invisible system, the one that judged before it checked, that filtered people through assumptions instead of actions, and now she could see it clearly, not just in herself, but in the way others moved through the space, the way certain guests were greeted differently, the way subtle biases shaped behavior without anyone saying it out loud. "I did not realize how automatic it was," she admitted quietly. Ethan nodded once. "Most people do not," he said. "That is why it matters when someone does." The conversation paused for a moment, not awkward, but thoughtful, as if both of them were processing something larger than the moment itself. But before Maya could respond, another interruption arrived, this time not in the form of a guest, but a staff member rushing toward the desk, his expression tense, his voice urgent. "Maya, we have a situation upstairs," he said quickly. "Room 1214 is having an issue with their reservation. They are saying it was confirmed, but the system shows something different." Maya turned immediately, her focus shifting. "I will handle it," she said, already stepping away from the desk. But before she could move further, Ethan spoke again, his tone calm but intentional. "Take your time," he said, and something in the way he said it made her pause for just a fraction of a second, not because she needed permission, but because she understood what he meant. This was not about rushing to fix a problem. It was about how she chose to approach it. Maya nodded once, then moved toward the elevators, her steps steady, her mind clear, and as the doors closed behind her, Ethan remained in the lobby, watching the space she had just left, not with expectation, but with quiet confidence, because for the first time since he had walked into that hotel, he was not wondering what he would find. He was waiting to see how far the change would go. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Maya stepped onto the 12th floor with the same steady focus she had carried all afternoon. But this time, the environment felt different, quieter, more contained, as if every sound mattered more in the enclosed hallway. The carpet softened her footsteps as she moved toward room 1214, her mind already organizing the situation, not rushing, not assuming, just preparing to understand before reacting. Outside the room, a man in his late 40s paced back and forth, his suit slightly wrinkled, his expression tight with frustration, and beside him stood a younger woman, arms crossed, clearly annoyed, the tension between them visible even before a word was spoken. "Good afternoon," Maya said calmly as she approached, her voice even, grounding the moment before it could escalate further. The man turned quickly, his tone sharp. "Finally, someone who can fix this," he said, gesturing toward the door. "We have a confirmed reservation, but your system says it does not exist." Maya nodded once, not reacting to the tone, not taking it personally, just focusing on the issue. "I understand. Let me take a look," she replied, her posture relaxed but attentive. She pulled up the reservation on her tablet, entering the details carefully, double-checking each piece of information before speaking again. "Can you confirm the name and the date of the booking for me?" she asked, her voice steady. The man sighed impatiently but provided the details, and as Maya reviewed the system, she noticed something subtle, a discrepancy not in the reservation itself, but in the timing, a third-party booking that had not fully processed through the hotel's internal system, something that could easily be overlooked if handled too quickly. She took a breath, grounding herself in the process. I see what happened, she said calmly. Your reservation was made through an external platform, and it did not fully sync with our system. But the confirmation you received is valid. The man paused, his frustration shifting into cautious attention. So we do have a room? He asked, his tone less aggressive now. Maya nodded. Yes, and I will make sure it is ready for you right away, she said. And instead of stopping there, instead of offering the minimum solution, she continued. I also want to make sure this inconvenience does not affect your stay, so I will personally upgrade your room to a suite at no additional cost. The younger woman beside him raised an eyebrow, surprised, and the man's posture softened, the tension easing from his shoulders. That would be appreciated, he said, his voice calmer now, and Maya offered a small, professional smile. Of course, give me just a moment, she stepped aside, coordinating with housekeeping and the system to ensure everything was aligned, not rushing, not cutting corners, making sure that what she promised was actually delivered. And within minutes, the situation shifted completely. What had started as frustration became relief, and as she handed over the updated key cards, the man nodded. Thank you for handling that, he said, his tone now respectful, not because of status, not because of who was watching, but because of how she had approached the situation. Maya nodded in return. Enjoy your stay, she replied, and as they entered the room, the hallway grew quiet again. Maya stood there for a brief second, not to admire the outcome, but to recognize the process. She had not reacted to the tone. She had not made assumptions about the situation. She had listened, checked, and responded with intention, and that difference had changed everything. As she turned back toward the elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished metal doors, and for a moment, she saw it clearly, not the version of herself from the night before, not the one who had drawn lines based on appearances, but someone who was learning to see beyond them. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, descending back toward the lobby, and when the doors parted once more, the familiar space greeted her, but it did not feel the same as it had that morning. It felt more open, more connected, as if she was no longer just standing behind the desk, but part of everything happening within it. Ethan Walker stood near the center of the lobby, speaking quietly with Mr. Collins, but his attention shifted the moment Maya stepped out. Their eyes met briefly, and without a word, he seemed to understand what had just happened, not the details, but the approach, the intention behind it. He ended his conversation and walked toward her, his expression calm, but there was something new there, something closer to certainty. How did it go? He asked, his voice low. Maya did not rush her answer. She met his gaze with the same steadiness she had carried upstairs. There was a gap in the system, she said, but the reservation was valid, so I fixed it. Ethan nodded slightly. And the guests? He asked. Maya allowed a small breath, not of relief, but of reflection. They arrived frustrated, she said, but they left satisfied. Ethan studied her for a moment, then gave a single nod. That is the difference, he said quietly, and as the words settled in, Maya realized that this was not just about solving problems. It was about transforming them, about taking moments that could divide and turning them into something that connected. And for the first time, she understood that the standard he spoke about was not a rule. It was a choice, one she now knew how to make. The lobby carried a different kind of energy as the evening approached, not rushed, not tense, but layered with something quieter, something reflective, like the building itself had absorbed the events of the day and was slowly settling into a new rhythm. Maya Johnson stood behind the desk, her posture relaxed but attentive, her movements deliberate, no longer driven by habit but by awareness. And with every passing hour, that awareness became more natural, less forced, until it felt like part of who she was rather than something she had to remember to do. Across the room, guests moved in and out, conversations flowed, and the soft glow of the chandeliers reflected against the polished marble, creating a sense of calm that had not been there that morning. Ethan Walker remained present, but not imposing. He moved through the space with a quiet observation, occasionally speaking with staff, occasionally pausing to take in the details, but never interrupting the flow. He was no longer searching for mistakes. Maya realized that now. He was watching for consistency, for whether the change she had shown was something real or something temporary. And that realization did not pressure her. It grounded her, because she was no longer performing for him. She was simply continuing. The front doors opened again, letting in a brief rush of cool evening air, and a young man stepped inside, his clothes clean but simple, his expression uncertain as he looked around the lobby, his eyes moving from the chandeliers to the front desk as if trying to decide whether he belonged there. Maya noticed immediately, not just his appearance, but the hesitation in his steps, the quiet way he held himself, and without waiting, she offered a small, welcoming smile. "Good evening. How can I help you?" she said, her voice steady, inviting. The young man approached slowly, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. I was wondering if you had any rooms available," he said, his tone careful, almost apologetic, and for a brief second, the memory of the night before flickered in Maya's mind. The same question, the same uncertainty, the same moment where a decision could shape everything that followed. But this time, there was no hesitation. She turned to the system, her fingers moving with practiced precision, checking availability fully before responding. "Yes, we do," she said, her voice warm. "What kind of room are you looking for?" The young man seemed surprised by the question, as if he had expected a different response. "Just something simple," he said, and Maya nodded. "We have a standard room available that would fit what you are looking for," she explained, providing the details clearly, giving him the same level of attention she would give any guest, no more, no less. And as she completed the booking, the young man's posture shifted slightly, his uncertainty easing into something more comfortable. "Thank you," he said quietly, and Maya returned the nod. "You are welcome. Enjoy your stay," she replied. And as he walked toward the elevators, she felt that quiet sense of alignment again, the kind that came not from doing something extraordinary, but from doing something right. Ethan had been watching from a distance, and when the interaction concluded, he approached the desk once more, his expression calm but thoughtful. "You did not hesitate," he observed, his voice low. Maya met his gaze, her answer simple. "I did not need to," she said, and there was no pride in her tone, no need for validation, just clarity. Ethan nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Consistency," he said quietly. "That is what most people struggle with." Maya considered that for a moment, understanding what he meant, because it was one thing to change once, to respond differently in a single moment. But it was something else entirely to carry that change forward, to make it part of every decision, every interaction, every choice. And as the evening continued, she realized that this was where the real challenge lived, not in recognizing the mistake, but in choosing not to repeat it. Time passed. The lobby grew quieter, the flow of guests slowed, and the soft hum of the space settled into a calm rhythm. Mr. Collins approached cautiously, his expression more relaxed than it had been earlier, but still carrying a hint of uncertainty. "Sir, will there be anything else you need before the end of your visit?" he asked Ethan, his tone careful. Ethan glanced around the lobby one last time, his gaze briefly passing over Maya, then returning to Mr. Collins. "No," he said simply. "I have seen what I came to see." The words were neutral, but they carried weight. Not final judgment, not yet, but something close to it, something that suggested a decision was forming. Maya felt the words settle in, not as pressure, but as a quiet understanding that the day was reaching its conclusion, that everything that had happened, every moment, every choice, had led to this point. Ethan turned slightly, preparing to leave, but before he did, he paused, his attention returning to Maya one last time, not as an observer, not as a tester, but as someone acknowledging what had changed. "Keep doing it this way," he said, his voice calm, and though the sentence was simple, it carried something more, not just instruction, but recognition. Maya nodded once, understanding that this was not the end of the story, not a resolution tied neatly into a single day, but the beginning of something ongoing, something that would be tested again and again in moments both big and small. And as Ethan Walker walked toward the exit, the glass doors opening to the cool evening air, Maya Johnson remained behind the desk. Not the same person who had stood there the night before, but not a finished version either, just someone who had chosen to see differently, and in doing so, had begun to change everything. The glass doors closed softly behind Ethan Walker, and for a brief moment, The Grand Meridian felt still, like the building itself was holding onto the echo of his presence before letting it fade into the rhythm of the evening. Maya Johnson remained behind the desk, her hands resting lightly on the polished surface, her posture steady, but her thoughts moving, not in uncertainty, but in reflection. Because the day had not ended with a dramatic conclusion or a clear verdict, it had ended with something quieter, something more demanding, the responsibility to continue, the responsibility to remain consistent even when no one was watching. And as the minutes passed, the lobby slowly returned to its familiar pace, guests checking in, conversations resuming, the soft clink of luggage wheels against marble blending into the background. But for Maya, nothing felt routine anymore. Every interaction carried intention, every decision held weight, and that awareness did not fade as the evening deepened. Instead, it settled into something steady, something sustainable. Mr. Collins approached her again, this time without the tension that had marked his earlier steps. His expression more measured, more thoughtful. "You handled today well," he said. His voice low, not drawing attention. Maya glanced at him briefly, surprised not by the words, but by the tone, because it was not the usual managerial approval. It was something closer to acknowledgement. She nodded slightly. "I learned a lot," she replied, and Mr. Collins studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand what had shifted. "So did I," he admitted quietly, and for a brief second, there was a shared understanding between them, something unspoken but real, the kind of understanding that only comes when a moment forces people to look at themselves more closely. The hours continued to pass. The lobby lights dimmed slightly as night settled in, and the steady flow of guests slowed into a calm, predictable rhythm. Maya moved through her responsibilities with the same care she had shown all day, greeting each person with the same level of respect, the same attention, not because she was trying to prove anything, but because it had become the only way that felt right. And then, just as the evening reached its quietest point, the doors opened once more, letting in a cool breeze from the city outside. Maya looked up instinctively, her attention shifting toward the entrance, and for a brief second, her breath caught, not from shock, but from recognition. Ethan Walker stepped back into the lobby, but this time, there were no black SUVs, no formal arrival, no staff rushing to greet him. He walked in alone, dressed simply, his jacket casual, his presence quieter, almost blending into the space he owned. And for anyone else, he might have looked like just another guest returning late in the evening. But Maya saw the difference immediately, not in his appearance, but in the choice behind it. He approached the desk without announcement, without expectation, and when he reached her, his expression was calm, almost neutral. "Good evening," he said. His tone no different from any other guest. Maya met his gaze, her voice steady. "Good evening. How can I help you?" she replied, and there was no hesitation, no flicker of recognition in her tone, just the same professionalism, the same respect she had shown everyone else. Ethan studied her for a moment, not testing, not challenging, just observing. "I would like a room for the night," he said simply. The same request, the same words, but a completely different moment. Maya nodded, turning to the system without delay, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the same careful precision, checking availability fully before responding. "We do have rooms available," she said, her voice even. "What type of room would you prefer?" Ethan did not answer immediately, his eyes remaining on her, as if the details of the room no longer mattered. Only the way the question had been asked, the way the process had been followed. "A standard room is fine," he said finally, and Maya completed the booking without rushing, without skipping steps, ensuring every detail was accurate before handing him the key card. "Here is your room," she said, offering it with a small, genuine smile. "If you need anything during your stay, please let us know." Ethan took the key, his fingers brushing lightly against hers for just a fraction of a second, not lingering, not significant in itself, but enough to mark the moment, and for a brief second, neither of them spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that mattered had already been shown. Ethan glanced down at the key card, then back at Maya, and this time, there was something different in his expression, not just observation, not just analysis, but recognition. "No assumptions," he said quietly, almost to himself. Maya held his gaze. Her answer simple. No assumptions, she repeated, and the words carried weight, not as a promise, but as a choice she had already made. Ethan nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but one that held more meaning than any formal acknowledgement could. Then you understand, he said, and for the first time since the night before, there was no distance between them, not defined by status, not shaped by perception, just two people standing in the same moment, seeing each other clearly. And as Ethan turned toward the elevators, key card in hand, Maya returned to her work, not because the moment was over, but because it had become part of something ongoing, something that would continue beyond this day, beyond this interaction, something rooted not in who he was, but in who she had chosen to become. The elevator doors closed softly behind Ethan Walker, carrying him upward into the quiet privacy of the upper floors. But the presence he left behind did not fade. It lingered in the space, in the air, in the subtle shift of how everything felt. Maya Johnson stood behind the desk, her hands moving with calm precision as she completed another check-in, her voice steady, her posture grounded, but inside, something deeper was settling into place. Not excitement, not relief, but clarity, the kind that does not demand attention, the kind that stays, because for the first time, she was no longer reacting to the moment. She was choosing within it. The lobby continued its quiet rhythm, the soft hum of conversation, the occasional ring of the phone, the distant sound of luggage wheels rolling across marble. And through it all, Maya remained consistent, not because she was being watched, but because she understood what it meant now. Time passed, minutes turning into an hour, and as the evening deepened, the lighting softened further, casting warm reflections across the space. Mr. Collins passed by once more, his usual tension replaced with something more measured. He paused briefly at the desk, glancing at Maya, as if considering something he had not fully acknowledged before. You know, he said quietly, I have been in this business for over 20 years. Maya looked up slightly, listening. And it is easy to forget why we do what we do, he continued, his voice thoughtful. We talk about standards, service, presentation, but sometimes we lose sight of the people in front of us. Maya nodded once, understanding exactly what he meant, because she had been part of that same pattern, that same blind spot, and now she could see it clearly, not just in herself, but in the system around her. Today reminded me, Mr. Collins added, before giving a small nod and walking away, leaving Maya with a quiet sense that the change had not been hers alone. Upstairs, Ethan stood by the window of his room, looking out over the city, the lights stretching into the distance, each one representing a life, a story, a moment that could not be captured by reports or numbers. His reflection faintly visible in the glass, his expression thoughtful, but not distant, not disconnected. He had seen what he needed to see, not perfection, not a flawless system, but something more valuable, something real. The elevator doors opened again, and Maya glanced up briefly, her attention shifting as a few guests stepped out, their conversation light, their movements unhurried. Everything felt normal, almost ordinary, but that was the difference, she realized, because now she understood that the ordinary moments were the ones that mattered most, not the dramatic ones, not the ones under scrutiny, but the quiet, consistent choices made when no one was paying attention. The front doors opened once more, letting in a soft breeze from the night air, and a familiar figure stepped inside, not Ethan this time, but the older woman from earlier in the day, her coat still worn, her presence still humble, but her posture different, more certain, more grounded. Maya's eyes softened as she recognized her, and without hesitation, she stepped forward again. Welcome back, she said warmly. The woman smiled, a real smile this time, one that carried confidence rather than hesitation. I hope it is not too late, she said gently. I wanted to ask about a room for the night. Maya nodded immediately. It is not too late at all, she replied, guiding her back toward the desk, her movements natural, unforced. She turned to the system, checking availability fully, not assuming, not rushing, just following the process she had committed to. We do have rooms available, she said, her voice steady. Let me find something that works for you. The woman watched her, not just with gratitude, but with trust, something that had been built earlier in the day and carried into this moment. And as Maya completed the booking, offering a room within the woman's means, explaining the details clearly, making sure everything was understood, the exchange felt simple, but meaningful, because it was rooted in respect, not charity, not obligation, just recognition. As she handed over the key card, Maya offered the same genuine smile she had given Ethan, the same tone, the same level of care. "You are all set," she said. "If you need anything, please let us know." The woman took the key, her fingers steady now. "Thank you," she said, her voice full, not hesitant, and as she walked toward the elevators, Maya felt that quiet sense of alignment again, the same one she had felt earlier, but stronger now, because it was no longer tied to a single moment. It was becoming a pattern, a way of being. Upstairs, Ethan stepped away from the window, his decision already made, not because of one interaction, not because of one change, but because of the consistency he had witnessed throughout the day, the kind of consistency that could not be faked, could not be performed, only lived. And as he reached for his phone, preparing to send a message that would shape what came next, Maya Johnson remained at the front desk, unaware of the decision forming above her, but fully aware of the person she had become, not defined by the mistakes she had made, but by the choices she continued to make after it. And in that quiet, steady moment, the real transformation was complete, not because it had been announced, but because it no longer needed to be. The night settled fully over the city, and the Grand Meridian stood glowing against the darkness, its glass walls reflecting the endless movement of lights outside. But inside, everything had slowed into a calm, deliberate rhythm. Maya Johnson remained at the front desk, her posture relaxed yet attentive, her presence steady in a way that no longer felt like effort, but like identity. The hours of the day had shaped something within her, something that could not be undone simply by the passing of time. And as she assisted the last few guests of the evening, her actions carried the same consistency, the same awareness, not because she was being tested, but because she had chosen it. Upstairs, Ethan Walker sat at the small desk in his room, his phone resting in his hand, the screen glowing softly as he reviewed a series of internal reports, feedback summaries, and operational metrics, all the data that once defined his understanding of the business. But tonight, those numbers felt incomplete, because they did not capture what he had witnessed throughout the day. They did not show the moment a decision was made without checking. They did not reflect the shift that followed. They did not measure the difference between assumption and intention. And as he set the phone down, his mind returned not to the mistake, but to the response, not to the failure, but to the change. He reached for his phone again, this time not to review, but to act, his fingers moving with quiet certainty as he composed a message, short, precise, but meaningful, a message that would not be announced publicly, not immediately, but one that would shape the future of the hotel in ways that extended far beyond a single day. Downstairs, Maya glanced briefly at the clock, noting the time as it moved closer to the end of her shift, but there was no sense of urgency in her movements, no desire to rush toward the finish. Instead, she remained present in each interaction, each moment, because she understood now that the standard did not end when the shift did. It carried forward, quietly, consistently. The elevator doors opened once more, and the older woman stepped out, her posture more upright now, her steps more certain. She approached the desk with a calm confidence that had not been there earlier. "I just wanted to say good night," she said softly, her voice warm. Maya smiled in return. "Good night. I hope you are comfortable," she replied, and the woman nodded. "Very much so. Thank you," she said, and as she turned to leave, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just a quiet sense of belonging that had been built through small, consistent actions. And as the woman disappeared down the hallway, Maya felt that same quiet alignment settle in again, the kind that did not demand recognition, but affirmed something deeper. A few moments later, Mr. Collins approached once more, his expression more composed than it had been all day, but there was a subtle tension in his posture, as if he was carrying something he had not yet shared. "Maya," he said, his tone measured. She looked up, attentive. "Yes," she replied. Mr. Collins paused for a brief second, then continued. I just received a message from Mr. Walker. The words landed softly, but they carried weight, not because of what they said, but because of what they could mean. Maya's expression remained calm, but her attention sharpened, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Mr. Collins glanced at her, as if trying to read her reaction, but she did not offer one. She simply waited, allowing the moment to unfold without rushing it. He has decided to implement a new training standard across all locations, Mr. Collins said slowly. One that focuses on real-time decision-making, on how staff respond to unexpected situations, on how guests are treated regardless of appearance or status. Maya listened carefully, the words settling in, not as a surprise, but as a continuation of everything that had happened that day. And, Mr. Collins added, his voice shifting slightly, he has asked for you to be part of that initiative. The statement hung in the air. For a moment, quiet but significant, Maya felt a small pause within herself, not disbelief, not hesitation, but recognition, because this was not about reward, not about recognition for a single moment. It was about the consistency she had shown, the choices she had made when it mattered. She nodded once, her voice steady. I understand, she said, and Mr. Collins studied her for a moment, perhaps expecting a stronger reaction, something more visible, but Maya did not react outwardly, because the meaning of the moment was not something that needed to be displayed. It was something that needed to be carried forward. Upstairs, Ethan stood once more by the window, looking out at the city, his decision already set into motion, not because he had found perfection, but because he had found potential, real, grounded, sustainable change. And as he turned away from the glass, preparing to leave in the morning, he knew that what had begun as an inspection had become something else entirely. Something that would extend beyond this building, beyond this day. Something rooted in a simple but powerful truth, that the way people are treated in the smallest moments reveals more than any report ever could. And downstairs, as the final guests of the evening passed through the lobby, Maya Johnson remained at her position, not waiting for what came next, but already stepping into it, because for her, the transformation had never been about the outcome. It had been about the choice, and that choice, once made, did not need to be repeated. It simply needed to be lived. Morning arrived quietly over the city, the first light slipping through the glass walls of the Grand Meridian and casting a soft glow across the marble floors. And for the first time in a long time, the lobby felt less like a stage and more like a place where something real could exist. Maya Johnson stepped behind the desk just as she always did, her uniform pressed, her posture steady, but there was something different in the way she moved now. Something grounded, something certain, not because the day ahead would be easier, but because she no longer approached it the same way. The doors opened, guests began to filter in, the rhythm returning, but this time, it felt aligned, intentional, as if each interaction carried meaning beyond the moment itself. Mr. Collins approached. Early, his usual urgency replaced with a calm focus. Corporate call this morning, he said quietly. They want to discuss the new initiative. Maya nodded, understanding what that meant, not as pressure, but as continuation. And as the morning unfolded, the staff moved differently, subtle shifts in behavior, small changes in tone, people paying closer attention, checking more carefully, responding more thoughtfully. It was not perfect, not immediate, but it was real. Upstairs, Ethan Walker, prepared to leave, his suitcase closed, his jacket folded over his arm. But before stepping out, he paused, glancing once more at the room, not as a guest, but as someone who had witnessed something unexpected, something that could not be planned or predicted, only revealed. He stepped into the hallway, the elevator carrying him back down to the lobby, and when the doors opened, the familiar space greeted him. But it felt different now, not because it had changed entirely, but because the way it was being experienced had shifted. Maya looked up as he approached, her expression calm, her voice steady. "Good morning," she said, and this time, there was no distance, no hesitation, just recognition. Ethan nodded slightly. "Good morning," he replied, placing his key card on the desk, a simple gesture, but one that marked the end of something and the beginning of something else. For a moment, neither of them spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because the words that mattered had already been lived. "You stayed consistent," Ethan said finally, his voice quiet but clear. Maya met his gaze, her answer just as steady. I chose to, she replied, and the simplicity of the exchange carried more weight than any formal acknowledgement could. Ethan studied her for a moment, not evaluating, not testing, but recognizing, and then he nodded once, a small gesture, but one that held finality. That is what makes the difference, he said, and as the words settled in, Maya understood that this was not about approval, not about passing or failing. It was about alignment, about becoming someone who did not need to be reminded of the standard because she carried it within her. Mr. Collins approached shortly after, his expression composed. The call is scheduled for 9, he said, glancing between them. Ethan acknowledged him with a slight nod, but his attention returned briefly to Maya. This is where it continues, he said. Not as a command, but as a statement of fact. Maya nodded, understanding fully, because she knew now that the real work was not in a single day, but in every day that followed. Ethan turned toward the doors, the same doors he had stood outside just hours before, the same doors where everything had begun, but this time, there was no rain, no hesitation, no uncertainty, just clarity. He stepped outside, the city alive around him, and for a moment, he paused, looking back through the glass, not at the building, but at the people within it, at the subtle shifts, the small changes that would continue long after he was gone. Inside, Maya returned to her work, greeting the next guest with the same calm presence, the same attention, the same respect, not because she had to, but because it had become who she was. And as the morning continued, the lobby filled with movement, with voices, with life, but beneath it all, there was something steady, something consistent, something that had been built not through rules or instructions, but through choice. And in that quiet, ongoing rhythm, the real transformation revealed itself, not as a moment, but as a pattern, not as an ending, but as a beginning, because sometimes the most important change is not the one that is seen, but the one that continues long after no one is watching.